Welcome to the Great American Divide. How you doing? Happy Friday. My name is Rob Hunter. Mike Russell is off today for Russell and Hunter's The Bromance. We wake up today. We understand maybe the country's a little bit different, but maybe it's not all that different because if you've been paying attention, you knew this was going to come. You knew this was the goal. You knew that Trump would be found guilty. At least I did. But what is exposed today is just how vast the American divide is. We're going to spend some time today talking about language and coverage and how really there is two different Americas. One side thought yesterday was outrageous, even though the result was predictable. The other side thinks this is justice. And both sides are certain that they are correct, hence the great American divide that we find ourselves in. And the great American divide, I don't know when it started. Maybe it's always been there. Maybe it's because of the way we communicate now, the constant communication channels that we get frustrated and we only see what we want. Because what's been exposed is the certainty of our belief systems in this country. Either that the government is corrupt, all of it, or that Trump is evil. Now, there are some of us that not really sure. Maybe we sit in the middle. Maybe we're trying to handle this realistically. And I think that that's really the key here because I look at Donald Trump and I look at what he said immediately after the guilty verdict came out yesterday, and I look at what he said this morning. And here's the thing about Trump. Like him or not, again, this is not endorsement of Trump. It's not a slam on Trump. It's just a reality of Donald Trump. Donald Trump handles reality really well. So he gets found guilty. He does what Trump does. He makes this about him and turns it into a campaign issue and says that the American people get to have a say in what happened to me, adding that this isn't going to be the last time. And I think that that's the big concern for a lot of people is there will be no restraint going forward. So if Republicans regain control, let's say Trump wins, let's say Republicans maintain the House, maybe even win the Senate. How much are they going to investigate Joe Biden, Democrats? Are they going to charge anyone with crimes? Are they going to find friendly jurisdictions like Alvin Bragg in Manhattan to find a jury that will convict you no matter what? Is that the country that we live in? Now, I say all of this, but there is reason for optimism. There's always reason for optimism. I'll get into that a little bit later. Hi, Greg. Hi, Rhonda. Thanks for saying hi. Greg's still pissed. Rhonda says it's crazy. The word pissed is interesting because, yesterday I popped on for a little bit after the verdict came out. I've been studying this for a long time, and maybe that's why I'm just not pissed anymore because I expect this. I expect that our government is not going to rise to the occasion. I expect that there's going to be no restraint in that George Washington way. I mentioned yesterday that Washington could have run for a third term, but he didn't want to. Could have been buried under the U.S. Capitol. Could have been a king, but he didn't want any of that because there is that concept of restraint, especially when it comes to power. So I've reevaluated how I vote for president and what I think of politicians. Because there is a ton of power that politicians get to yield. There is a ton of power that attorney generals, district attorneys get to yield because we've allowed it. So I'm at this place where I focus on my role as an individual American. And what is my role as an individual American in this great American divide? My role is to try to inform as many people as possible to take responsibility for our country. I mentioned this on Memorial Day. What stood out to me about this past Memorial Day is the soldiers that gave their lives for this country. Now, normally we say thank you and we honor their sacrifice. But this year it hit different because in thinking about all those men and women that laid their life on the line for us, I think about my responsibility to them. And my responsibility to them is to do my part to ensure that we really figure out what we want to do as voters. Because in taking responsibility, starting with my own life, I take responsibility as a voter. I take responsibility for my role in voting for candidates that have allowed laws like this to be passed. Not in Manhattan per se, but there are federal laws that are very similar. And I do want to clear up something about this case here in just a few minutes. But the divide that we're facing here is real. And this is where our responsibility as voters comes in understanding who we vote for and how involved we get might leave us with candidates we don't really like or the lesser of two evils. And as long as I've been in talk radio, which is now about 25 years, I've heard that same complaint. I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Well, if we got involved maybe earlier in the process, maybe that doesn't have to be a reality in who we vote for. So that is our responsibility. So I take responsibility for my voting past that have allowed verdicts and power shifts and laws like this to be used and wielded. And yesterday I held up 3 books that have showcased in the last 15 years, 20 years, just how much the government has gone awry. But the big change that we have to make as a country is we cannot wait for the pain. We have to change now. We cannot wait for a verdict to come in and get pissed off and say, wow, they finally did it. Because this ball has been rolling for years. As Colin pointed out, the great Rush Limbaugh predicted a verdict like this. And Rhonda brings up a good question as well. Who would want to run for any public office? Maybe we can find good people. Maybe we can find it in ourselves to nominate people that might have a past that maybe isn't perfect, isn't ideal, and we still like them because they've changed, learned lessons, lived life. But I'm just not sure we're ready for that, because the real big challenge that we have, regardless of party, regardless of Trump, regardless of guilty verdicts, is spending. We don't want to talk about that. It's a boring issue. It's not sexy. So we won't do anything about it. We won't change until we're bankrupt or until a major program like Social Security is gutted because we spent all the money. Because that's human nature. So the point here in our responsibility is to awaken ourselves, to shake ourselves out of a resistance to change. Because this guilty verdict is just another indication as to how we as voters have to change. We as citizens have to change the conversation. We have to unplug from the media narratives. Because all of it has been very predictable. I lived in this world for 25 years, like I said, the media political sphere. And one of the main reasons why I left KFYI was because it became so predictable. It became so, this is the Trump side, this is the not Trump side. There's no room for anything else in the media sphere for some reason. None. But check this out, because I want to get in the American divide here in just a second. With this Trump guilty verdict, he raised a ton of money, which was smart. Because again, Greg, for example, while you're outraged, which is fine, notice what the Trump team did. So once they got word that the jury was done deliberating, and what they deliberate for, about 12 hours, a little less than that. Usually when a verdict comes in that quickly, it's not good for the defendant. The longer it takes, the better it is, because there's more questions. There might be a higher chance of a mistrial. So you have those factors in here. So Trump's team was ready for this guilty verdict, and they put out the fundraising call just a few minutes after the verdict came in. And here's funny, because if you look at this here, I'm going to shift that view. This is, I don't even remember which article this was from, but this is a traditional news media coverage article. The former president has made it a habit of turning his legal problems into campaign fundraising pitches. Okay, fair, right? Because after all, everything's an opportunity. And this is, when you look at Donald Trump, again, whether you like him or not, look at how he lives his life. Take your emotion out of it and look at how he responds to reality. There was an interview he did on one of those gossip television shows, Entertainment Tonight or something. This was way back in the 80s. Maybe it was early 90s. And it's always stood out to me because what Trump said. It's an old adage that if you believe you can, you can. And if you believe you can't, you can't. So Trump always believes in himself, period, point blank. It's something we can all learn from, and you can apply it your own way. So, of course, Trump is going to be ready for when reality hits to make an opportunity because in life, opportunities don't come often. You have to constantly try to create your opportunities. So, when reality strikes, put the emotions aside, handle those later, get to work. So, Trump got to work. And the media is like, I cannot believe that he would use something like this to raise money. And he raised $35 million. But here's the other funny part about this, because this article that I have here, and again, I can't remember where I pulled it from. Maybe it was Vox, VOX. Here is a fundraising pitch the Biden team sent out. They sent this one out at 4:40 Arizona time yesterday afternoon, a couple of hours after the verdict came in. Biden headquarters. Despite a jury finding Donald Trump guilty today, we need money. So the article did not mention that Biden, too, is trying to raise money off of Trump's guilty verdict. And this is what they say in that tweet, or this is text. I signed up for the text alert just because I like to see how often they send them and what they say. Donald Trump's supporters are fired up and likely setting fundraising records for his campaign. Now, this text to me reeks of desperation. And I think the Biden team finally understands what they're up against. And there's something else to add in here. Nothing really changed yesterday as far as the election goes. People that are going to vote for Trump still going to vote for Trump. People that aren't going to vote for Trump are going to vote for Biden. But the thing for Biden is no one likes him. And he has a realistic shot of losing to now a convicted felon. That's how bad Joe Biden is performing. That's why you see this desperation here and pointing, oh my God, Trump's fundraising. We got to do the same thing. So this one was sent out at 4:40 p.m. Less than 3 hours later, I get the second one. This one is from De Niro, the actor who was outside the courtroom and saying that Trump will never leave. So this is how desperate the Biden team is. The fact that they can't easily beat a convicted felon shows exactly where America is. And here's De Niro. I still can't believe Donald Trump got elected president. Dude, let it go. Again, using Trump as an example. Again, I don't agree with Trump on everything. But as an example of how to live a life on your terms, Donald certainly has done that. Whether you agree with his decision-making, what he says or not. If you take all of the emotion and the politics out of it, and you just look at him as an individual, he teaches us life lessons and what to do when you have crappy circumstances. So the Democrats react. They send out 2 fundraising pitches in less than 3 hours, one from Team Biden, one from De Niro. But it gets even better. Let me pull up my phone here because I didn't pull the screenshots on these ones. I got 2 more today already. So I got one from Joe Biden, humble request, asking you to donate $20 right through text. That came in at 6:27 a.m. So now in about 14 hours, 3 texts for money from Biden come out. And then at 9:23 this morning, the 4th text came out. Team Biden-Harris. This is what it says. Trump's campaign just announced he raised $35 million after a jury found him guilty yesterday. We need your help to fight back and keep him out of the White House. Desperation. Because yesterday did not move the needle, but it did expose what we are as a country right now, politically. Completely divided. Completely on opposite sides. Truman, I'm going to get to your comment here in just a bit, too, about fighting fire with fire, because that's what's going to happen. So as we go in this country that is doing this, right, it's going in different directions. We want different things from our country. We have language like this. This is from the website Vox, VOX. And this really is the epitome of the language that we see. Amidst a long track record of Trump surviving past scandals, a robust right-wing media ecosystem peddling alternative narratives that Democrats are the corrupt ones, and widespread dissatisfaction with Joe Biden's presidency, it's far from clear a conviction will really make such a difference in practice. The person who wrote this is one of their editors at Vox. She is 100% certain that Donald Trump is the bad guy. And I know a little bit about certainty. Certainty is a belief system. So I'll ask you guys a question. You believe in God? Faithful? How certain are you that God exists? Probably pretty certain. You have faith that God is there. This is the same thing. It's just a political belief system revolving certainty. And certainty is hard to move, it's hard to change. Certainty is like an anchor into the ground that you have to dig out. Because the way that she points this out is the way that most members of the media think, at least the establishment media, as we call them. You don't really call them mainstream anymore because they're not mainstream. But they can't understand why people might be mad that Donald Trump was convicted, that Donald Trump faced this charge. So this is the language of certainty, not quite sure how Donald Trump is still popular, how he's still raising $35 million. Now here's the Trump side. So again, we have the language of the anti-Trump side. That is half of the media. And then we have the pro-Trump media. That will slam Alvin Bragg, the prosecuting attorney, the district attorney in Manhattan, who brought the case against Donald Trump and, as that points out, ran on that issue. Think about it for a moment, the author writes. A Democratic politician campaigned on the promise of locking up the chief rival to the president of the United States. Then he brought an extremely thin case based on an unproven legal theory. Oh, fascinating. A moment on that, on this legal theory. I don't think this is going to stand up to appeal, but that doesn't matter because the appeal won't happen probably for a year from now. Maybe it gets sped up because Trump is running for president. Because here's what this case is about. The initial charge, the hush money payments Trump made through Michael Cohen to porn star Stormy Daniels to not run the story in the National Enquirer, so paid her off, is a misdemeanor charge in the state of New York. And the judge said to the jury, once the case was closed, that they can find Trump guilty really on various crimes. Because the way this thin legal, unproven legal theory, as this author points out here, works is that they didn't want him on the misdemeanor. They wanted him on the felony. So the misdemeanor becomes a felony if Trump committed another crime by paying off Stormy Daniels. And the crime that they're alleging doesn't have to be spelled out in court. So you don't have to specifically say that Trump paid off Stormy Daniels to keep someone like Hillary Clinton from becoming president of the United States, interfering in an election, in other words. So the jury was free to pick any crime they thought Trump might have been guilty of using that $130,000 in repayments. That's why this author is saying this is an unproven legal theory. And it's a weird case. And I would think that appealing that is a good option because you didn't have to spell out what the actual felony was. So all they had to do was prove that he paid money to Michael Cohen back that Michael Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen was one of Trump's assistants, his lawyer, fixers, the thing that's been called. But see, that's the thing. The thing is, that legal part is dubious because the prosecuting team didn't have to even bring up what the felony is. The way the law is written in New York allows the jury to make it up. As long as they're convinced that there was a crime, a felony, it doesn't matter whether or not you prove that. So I don't know how this case holds up in appeal. But see, this is the thing that I talked about yesterday. I'm going to hold up my book again. This is one of my favorite ones. This is the book, one of the books that changed my way of thinking, that turned me into a libertarian, basically, fully all the time. Is that all the years, all the politicians we voted for, both Republicans and Democrats, have passed laws that have allowed investigations of you for vague crimes, open-ended laws that are written specifically designed to give politicians, bureaucracies, law enforcement agencies power over you. And what you see in this comment here is the word banana republic, which I saw about 50,000 times yesterday because no one's creative anymore. But that's part of that American divide that we're talking about here, the language divide. And this is about a belief system, going back to that. So you probably today believe that this is a miscarriage of justice. But obviously, if we go back to the Vox author here, she thinks it's 100% justice. So you see that divide. Now, the question going forward is, how do you win the other side? How do you influence the other side? I'm a communications expert. I left talk radio to help people get to the point quicker and clearer so that there's less ambiguity in what you say. So I work with one-on-one clients on this. And this is this type of stuff that I see. How do you influence other people? You influence other people by listening to what they say and then casually asking them questions and guiding them where you want. But that doesn't work real well in the media sphere. You don't get shared on social media if you have a logical point, because social media thrives on emotion. I just heard the other day, I was listening to this interview, and the guy pointed out that the algorithms are all geared towards the 7 deadly sins. So you think about that, how easy it is to be outraged, how easy it is to be disappointed, how easy it is to react to things. And it takes us out of our logical brain, because the logical brain in me sees this political divide and sees two different realities. You remember John Edwards, the candidate that ran for president several years ago? He was John Kerry's vice presidential nominee in 2004, ran again in 2008 as president. I interviewed him back then in 2008. It was before the scandal of all the, what did he have? The love child, John Edwards? Well, he was found guilty of that. And prior to that, he had this whole idea that there were two Americas, one for the rich and one for the poor. Now we have two Americas that's completely divided in half based on one guy, Donald Trump. So this is a good point. Larry brings this up. So how do you win the other side? Trump supporters see this as a scam. The left sees this as a win. Everyone in the middle only sees 6 p.m. news, says he's a felon with no context of what happened. So there is a gap right there. Because influencing people is a patient process. It doesn't happen in 5 minutes. It doesn't happen in a day. It happens over time. And because we live in this advanced technological age, we struggle with patience. I do, because we can have everything we want now. We can order stuff from Amazon without having to go to the store. It might be here in 4 hours. I ordered something. This piece of equipment that I broadcast to you with, I ordered it. It was in my house within 3 hours. I'm like, that's fantastic, because I can have it now. So all of this influences our decisions. All of this influences what we say and how we feel. But the question is, beyond how we feel, what is it that we want to do about this? Because you already got Trump voters, you already got Biden voters. And you got that little portion that Larry's talking about that's in the middle, that is undecided, that doesn't really like Biden, doesn't really like Trump. How do you use this in an effective way to right the wrongs? Because if we agree that this is an injustice, number one, the appeals process may take care of that. But you want to talk about interfering in an election, which is what essentially the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is alleging that Trump did by denying Hillary Clinton her rightful place as president. You see what we're up against. To Larry's point, convicted felon, is it going to matter? Well, if inflation continues the way it is, here in Phoenix, we're still paying about $4 a gallon for gas. We're 26% poorer than we were 4 years ago. That may matter more than Trump's felony conviction on a whoop-de-doo charge. Now, if they got him on the January 6th one, or they got him in the Georgia case, in the RICO case for the election, different story. I think those are way more impactful, because I do think, call it 40%, there's probably at least 45% of people that will not vote for Donald Trump. That doesn't mean they'll all vote for Biden. There'll be some RFK votes, but let's put the number at 45% as lost cause. But that gives you about 10% to work with, because you probably got minimum 40% voting for Trump. So 40, 45, then 85. So you got like a 15% right there in the middle. That's the target. But here's what I would like Republicans to do. Offer me a solution. Offer me a fix. Because going back to what Truman said in the comments here, that it's time to throw down the gauntlet and quit playing nice, because the other side's fighting dirty and they appear to be very good at it. Now, what does that mean? So, Truman, if you're here still, please expand on that because here's two different ways to read that comment. And some of the things I saw this morning are yes, Republicans will go after Democrats, including Joe Biden. They're just going to arrest everybody. But the second part of this is actually doing something about this, about these laws that are written so vaguely that can bust anyone, bust Trump, bust you. Start dismantling those laws, start restructuring government, because that's what Republicans have always told me they wanted to do. Lessen government power, lessen government spending. But every time I turn around, it seems that Republicans only add laws that give government more power. I mean, look at the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security, which now takes your pictures at airports before you can get on a plane, created by Republicans. That was bipartisan, but Bush was the president then. So we really have to come up here, like the Stoics suggest, to take a 30,000-foot view of where we're at in America. And we have to decide if this is the type of government that we want. It can't just be we're pissed off, we're going to go after the Democrats. No. Fine. But let's dismantle the apparatus that allows this political malfeasance, because that's the win. That's when you go back to your freedom roots. But the question is there enough of us that care enough about these difficult issues, the power, the money, the system? Is there enough of us that can put political pressure on Congress to actually do something? Because always remember this, a politician's goal is to go back to Washington, D.C. So they will say and do whatever they want to win. In fact, Biden this week, he went to Morehouse College. Morehouse College is a historically Black university, HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. And he's obviously placating the audience, saying that Republicans like Donald Trump want to put put Black people in jail. It's just obnoxious, but it's desperation. The Democrats right now are desperate because they cannot figure out why they can't just get Trump to go away. They cannot figure out why Trump is popular. But Trump is popular because of this, right? Trump is popular because he's one of the few politicians left that still says good things about America. Many don't, at least not with that stage. So that's what the Democrats don't understand. And the Democrats don't understand that they're labeling millions of people as racists, as whatever, bad people, horrible people, because some Democrats got real snobby, real elitists, and look down upon many Trump voters. Maybe people that live in Mississippi, shop at Walmart. So you have all these challenges ahead of us because you have a language ecosystem that reinforces the two sides, and only the two sides. Whereas Mike and I, trying to come at it from a more neutral reality standpoint and what to do about it, we don't generate the emotions of the algorithm. We don't generate the firepower that the hot take does. The hot take that's designed to manipulate you and take your eye off the ball, because that's all this is. And here's something else I want to add to this, because this is where the opportunity really does lie. This is from a website called Semaphore. They get their hands on some polls done by Democrats. And what these polls suggest is how young people view America. It's not great, but it probably mirrors how you view America. And I'm fortunate enough, I have a bunch of young friends who are around the age of 30. And there are a lot of them went to ASU, went to Cronkite School of Journalism, and they have a very different worldview, right? Because they grew up in an advanced technological era, even more advanced than when I grew up. I got the internet, I think I was 12 or 13. You know, slow dial-up. You probably remember those days. Well, these 30-year-olds didn't have the slow internet. They've had big internet. Because of that, they've had information flows that are different than we are. They have social media for most of their lives. So it changes the way that they view everything. So because the language on both sides basically calls the other side corrupt, this is what young people think. A dying empire led by bad people. Poll finds young voters despairing over the U.S. So think about that. This is not saying that young people like Republicans or Democrats. This is saying that young people think our government is horrible. Bad people run it, and we're running America into the ground. Here's even more. So if you look at this, about 1,000 18 to 30-year-olds. So again, this is I have some insight into some of these groups. 49% that say that the elections don't represent people like them. I've been feeling that way for a very long time. I'm glad to see that other people are coming around on it because it has been incredibly frustrating being behind the scenes and covering government and covering politicians because I understand that they're not taking my wants and needs into account. They're taking their own. And in taking their own, it leads us into this system that doesn't really represent people. So again, 18 to 30-year-olds, 51% agreed to some extent that the system doesn't work for people like them. So that's over half, just slightly over half, but that's absolutely amazing. And then here's the big whopper here. 64% say America is in decline, and 65% say nearly all politicians are corrupt and make money from their political power. But that key at that bottom there, only 7% disagree. This is the opportunity right here. This is the opportunity for Republicans to offer young voters something new, something different, something that young voters can feel proud about America in. Because again, this goes back to that divide. If you strip away Trump and you strip away media and you strip away Republican and you strip away Democrat, what you have is people that like America and you have people that don't like America. Or stick to this idea that America's original sin of slavery can never be forgiven and therefore this country is doomed forever. That's a belief system. And that is a belief system that has stuck with a lot of people because language is contagious. One of my theories that I developed in my communication course called Master Your Message. What you say sticks or it doesn't because 80% of what we hear, we forget at least. It's the memorable stuff that you remember. So the point is to try to be memorable, inspirational, to understand where young voters are coming from here in this time where a former president is found guilty on 34 counts. So here's this part too. The sour mood at the bottom here points to potential trouble for Biden, who's struggling with Gen Z and younger millennials in polls. Why? Because Biden's barely a president of the United States. This is an opportunity. Going back to what I said about Trump, Trump always creates opportunities in any circumstance. And that's the best way to live life because I started to do that about 20 years ago, almost by accident, not even knowing it. As I was a young baby producer, producing a talk show in Gainesville, Florida, WSKY. Shout out to my man, Andrew Lee, first guy that took a chance on me. Rest in peace. He just passed away last year. Only 49, too. Horrible. But he took a chance on me. And as I got in that station, I just did everything because I had multiple skills. So I could write news. I could do news. I could do all these things. So he started to plug me in more and more and more and more and more. And then it was one Christmas Eve. I'm the new guy. Got to show up to work on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, which I did 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row. And he said to me, you can do a segment or two if you want. And I may have told you this story before, but the point is to create your opportunities. So that 2 segments became 4, which is a full hour, 4 segments in a talk radio show. And he heard it. He calls me and I thought I was in trouble. And he said, it was actually pretty good. So because I took that chance, I created that opportunity for myself and got my first talk show, weekends, sports show called Big Time Sports. And that led to me doing a 1-year anniversary 9/11 special in 2002. That is what got me my job in New Orleans, my first big talk show that I got that was called The Rob Hunter Show. So again, you create your opportunities. So whether you like Trump or not, whether Trump impacts your emotions or not, he does teach an important life lesson that it's up to you to create your opportunities. And Trump certainly is creating his opportunities. And quite honestly, at this moment in time, I think he's going to win. I think what's going to happen is America's going to kind of go into safe mode because we're all like, dude, we need to chill. So I think it's going to be Trump. I think the Democrats keep the Senate. I think the Republicans keep the House, which might be okay because not a whole lot of damage can be done. I'd rather have the Republicans in control of the House to maybe try to restrain spending instead of borrowing $3 trillion in 1 year's time, which the current administration is doing. So creating your opportunities right now based on that poll that you just saw, this one with the young voters, right? This is huge. Inspire them. Give them hope that their America is going to be prosperous, that their America is growing upwards, that we are leading the world, because this is how societies advance prosperity. So in America's founding time, Britain was that. Britain was innovating. Britain was the great empire. And even after we, as a country, revolted and established our own country, the great empire Britain continued to lead the world, sailing around the world, colonizing, technological advancements. All of that was going on. And then America, we start to pick up Industrial Revolution, World War I, getting into World War II. And then World War II, we just take off. We become the beacon of hope for the entire world, not only because we sent millions of men to fight Hitler and the Japanese. Women went to work, made it happen, and we come back and we're just on fire, right? Boom. Technological advancement after technological advancement. And what that did for all of us is made our lives easier. So for young people, giving them that perspective that in order to continue to grow like America has, we have to be the country that innovates the newest technology that raises our productivity, because productivity gains mean your life's better, my life's better. Because I look at my life, I'm so glad I was born in the late 70s, because, man, I didn't really have to do manual labor to survive, because generations before did that. Because I live in America, I was born in this place of great innovation where productivity gains improved our quality of life. That's the message to the young voters. That's why I'm still optimistic, because whoever grabs a hold of this new technological front, whether that's AI, whether it's these chips that power this advanced technology, whoever's leading the way on that is going to lead the way of the world. And it's better for the entire world if America leads that way, because we still, at least to a degree, love freedom. And I think that young people want freedom. In fact, I had a conversation with my friend Eric today. We're talking about our own values. We have a very similar value. It's the exact same value. Our first personal value is freedom. And see, I used to look at freedom through this lens, and I still do. Government's relationship to us, to you, to me. But because I cannot control this, because I cannot control what happened to Trump, I cannot control what the government does. I can only control what I do. So the ultimate freedom lies in me, regardless of what's happening in the outside world. And one of the other great stories that I love is the story of Reuben Hurricane Carter, boxer. Remember him? So he was a prominent boxer, got charged with triple homicide, put him in jail. Dude was innocent, and he knew he was innocent. But he went into jail and he said, the one thing they cannot take from me is my mind. And Reuben Hurricane Carter refused to wear the prison uniform. He refused to have pornography in his cell. He refused to acquiesce to the criminal justice system, knowing that he was innocent. And eventually, 19 years later, he was freed. He didn't seek any money from it. He just counseled people. He helped people because he kept his mind free. So regardless of the circumstances, he had a purpose. He knew what his mind was capable of, and he stuck to that. Nelson Mandela is another great example. He was thrown in jail, basically a racist apartheid plot in South Africa. I think he was in jail for 27 years, but what he did is he studied. And he studied the language of his oppressor. Why? Because you see a poll like this, and you find ways to talk to young people about the graciousness of America, the graciousness of freedom, the value of freedom, and that you young people, you're going to shape this country's future. So it's up to you as an individual to create your opportunities, because the government's not creating them for you. And that's part of what this poll says, right? You go back to this part. The political system doesn't work for people like me. It's not really designed to, But we've sold this myth that the government is here to solve all the problems. But if you look at the history of the United States government or any government, they do not solve problems. Yeah, once in a while they get a win, they do something right. But mostly, get it wrong. Mostly it's power grab. Mostly it's about spending your money. But herein lies this opportunity, if we're willing to take advantage of it, because it's there for us. It's there for us to work on our language, work on our communication, and work on our influence. Because yelling and screaming doesn't influence anybody. I get that people are mad. Okay, I'm not. You know why I'm not mad? Because I can't control what happened. So why am I going to put my emotions on the line for something I can't control? I've been studying Stoicism the last 5 or 6 years. And the main tenet of Stoicism, aside from looking at life from a 30,000 foot view and putting your own life in perspective and what your role is. But the other main belief that the Stoics taught us, guys like Marcus Aurelius, I was just in Italy in November. And one of the things they said about Marcus Aurelius, he's regarded as one of the 5 best emperors in Rome. In fact, of the 105 or so emperors they had in the Roman Empire, they regard 5 of them, historians, as great. Marcus Aurelius was one of them. He was a proponent of Stoicism because he would take this 30,000 foot view and it would help him lead because he's looking at more than just his perspective or more than just his political party's perspective. And I think that that's the part where Trump could pivot, is doing that. Taking this poll, fusing in what happened to him about the future of America and how he's going to make it better and how he's going to undo the power that the government has. And he's going to work with both parties to do that, whatever the case may be, whatever that messaging ends up being, because that's reaching out. That's getting beyond being mad. That is doing something about it. And thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. I don't know if it's life lessons that have taught me these things, but it is in part because when I started to read these books, this book again came out in 2003, so 21 years ago, I was pissed. And I was pissed all the time. And I couldn't believe that people wouldn't wake up and understand the power that the government has. But as I got older, and as I closed in on 40, I started to think about, why am I letting something I can't control? The dichotomy of control is the Stoic lesson, because you can only control you. And I teach this in my communication classes, right? I teach that you're only in charge of what you say, how you say it, and what you do. It's pretty simple when you really think about it. So I can control my reaction. I can control my opportunities. I can control what I say, but I can't control what you say. And you can't control what I say. So in understanding what I can control, me, I started to really focus on me. And in doing that, it allows me to see things much more clearly. It allows me to sit here with you guys today and tell you this. And I'm not outraged. I expected this. And because I expected it, I'm not mad. Because I've been doing this for a long time. And because of this book, I knew a day like this would come. My only hope is that it does cause us to wake up. Because it is wake up time. Because the language that we see, that we consume, is important. Again, another lesson I teach is language is contagious. Not just about what you say and how it sticks to others, but what you read. What you read, what you see, what conversations you have, it all cycles around in this brain. And that brain thinks that this is reality. When oftentimes it's not, because I have nothing to do with this case. I was in New York. I don't live in New York. I wasn't on the jury. I'm not on the legal team. I don't work for Donald Trump. So it literally has nothing to do with me. And there's nothing else I can do about that unless I want to volunteer, get involved, become a lawyer, all these things. So because I understood that, the outcome doesn't impact me. The outcome inspires me to have this conversation with you, to stay chill. And as Lynn says, prayer, absolutely, whatever you want to call it, prayer, meditation, alone time, a way to get grounded. Because I do think that that's really the big challenge, because we have these devices, right? These phones, because we have our computers, however you're watching us today or listening to us today. And by the way, thank you. I know that this is a difficult road. I know that this is asking you guys to change your habits a little bit because it's not quite as simple as pressing the button on the radio when you get in the car and, oh, there's Rob and Mike. So I understand that this is the challenge, but the challenge of our time to me seems to be disconnecting our emotions from our social media accounts and our media coverage because it is designed to manipulate you. Over the years, politicians, marketers, media organizations have spent billions of dollars understanding how your brain works and understanding how to attract attention in a manipulative way, not a healthy way, not a growth mindset way, because they want to distract you from what's really going on. And let's go behind the scenes here. I know that the Trump story is a big story, but there's another big story here that has potentially massive implications. But again, this is a story that I've known for a long time. This one in particular is about this guy, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, we all know Fauci. Tony Fauci, the virologist, the face of our pandemic, which consumed nearly 3 years of our lives. Well, it turns out there's some evidence that people who were talking to Fauci were going around Fauci's official government email using Fauci's personal Gmail accounts to say who knows what. So this representative, Republican, Weinstrup, who's on the House Oversight Committee looking into the pandemic, is trying to get access to Fauci's email and cell phone because there's evidence of that secret back channel. Again, this is no surprise because we know the rules of at least, I don't know if you know the rules, and I don't mean that disparagingly. It was my job to know these rules. Freedom of information requests, government emails, public domain. You can have access to those. They didn't want you to have access to something because the same thing with the media. Information is power because information is knowledge. And knowledge is what allows you to adjust your life to your living, to the way that your life is. And this is really key. And I'm going to try to figure out how to explain this in a clear way because I'm still working through this theory about how information works. So again, I mentioned I was in Italy. I've been to Italy 3 times. I know I'm bragging a little bit, but I got the travel bug early. I somehow convinced my parents when I was a freshman in high school, let me go on a school trip to Italy and Greece. And that really started my love of travel. And in the 3 times I've been to Italy, Rome, I've been to the Vatican, home of the Catholic Church, and I grew up Catholic. And we went on this tour. And we were looking at these amazing art pieces in the Vatican Museum. And it's best to get a tour guide because the thing is massive and you won't know where to go. And I asked the tour guide, I said, do you know what any of these artists like Caravaggio or Michelangelo thought about religion? And her answer was no. Why was it no? Because the church controlled the information at the time. It was the most powerful institution on earth. And around that time, maybe as 1100s, Crusades, 1200s, 1300s, literacy was not a big thing. Not many people knew how to read, but the priests did. So the priests were the ones that taught information. But as you know about the Catholic Church, they hide a lot of things. So if you are someone that gathers a lot of information, but you only want some of it to come out, you have a lot of power. And this story about what Fauci is alleged to have done is exactly that. It is a story as old as humanity. How powerful people, rich people, governments withhold information so you don't know what they're doing. So here's the craziest reality out there. There are about 1 billion documents every year that the government classifies. They don't want you to see. Only certain people who have cool access codes get to know this stuff because information is power. And I always used to think that what the government was covering up was malfeasance, corruption. But I understand that, yes, that's part of it. And there's end arounds like Fauci is doing here. And how many thousands of government officials are probably doing the same thing? They're texting people instead of emailing people, keeping it out of the .gov email address. And they're doing that for the same reason the Catholic Church used to suppress information, power. because Fauci was an elevated position during the pandemic where he was the main information source because he was the quote unquote expert. But if there was conversations about lab leak theory, if there was conversations about the vaccines not working as well as they were, if there were conversations about how to shut down governments or how to shut down people, rather, how to gather data on people, all these things that were outside of this, it shows that same thing that the Catholic Church used to do, that Fauci and the experts and whatever, I can't remember the department's name that he worked in, Fauci and his cohorts kept information from you, which is why the main problem behind all of this today is a trust problem. It's a trust problem in media because the media is certain that Donald Trump is a felon and awful and shouldn't be the president of the United States. Besides the fact that there are millions of people who think the same about Biden. He shouldn't be president of the United States. And they almost can't fathom why. And it's almost as if they're outside of the normal economy somehow and they don't recognize the difficulties that are out there. So this is a language, a control of information. Same thing that's been happening throughout the history of time. Like you look at a country like North Korea or China. China has strict controls on their internet. And China has shifted their strategy in what information they give people. What they used to do in China is shut down any conversation about democracy, human rights. They just neutered it. But then in the pandemic, they went crazy and quarantined millions and millions and millions of people in their homes. Billions of people. Well, 1.5 billion people or so that live in China. And the Chinese people, some of them got ticked, went out in the streets, started protesting. So President Xi was like, okay, all right, we're going to change strategies here. Or someone as an administration, instead of hiding information about democracy and human rights from the Chinese people, we're just going to disparage democracy. We're going to call it racist. So they're controlling the information so that you only know what you know. Because I recently started to think about this as far as what information that I've received, whether it's about Fauci's emails or schooling education, and how much I know and how much I don't know. Because in looking at Fauci's performance throughout the pandemic, it was very clear that the dude was lying to me. And Mike and I talked about that a lot. The data was manipulated. The truth was not getting out because Fauci and his team were controlling the information. Now, luckily, if you listen to Russell and Hunter, Mike and I were able to find good, solid data from outside sources that we're able to share with you. And our approach during the pandemic was rational, which is exactly what my approach here with the Trump story is. I'm always rational. I'm always optimistic. I am hopeful because this is America. This is the land where I got to do what I wanted to do. I got to live my dream. Pursuit of happiness, my way, free to do that. That's a win. And that's what China understands, is that the natural human tendency, the natural human want is to pursue something fun, something you love. Now, in economies where money is exchanged, sometimes it could become difficult because sometimes you're like, I'm just going to take a job. And you stay in that job and you make money. So you trade off your dreams for security, monetary security. Well, China's a little bit different than that. China doesn't have the opportunities that we have. And now that they're disparaging democracy, same thing Russia's doing, same thing North Korea is doing. And what China has also done, their use of language is fascinating because we had, I think it's called Voice of America, something like that. It was like a radio station that broadcasts pro-America stuff all around the world. Well, China does that too. But it's not just pro-China stuff. It's America's bad, democracy's bad, Britain's bad. Look at the horrible things that are going on in those countries. Because they don't want people to have the information about freedom. Same thing that Fauci apparently did. But see, none of this outrages me because I'm certain in myself. I am certain that I know how to handle the pandemic for me better than Fauci knows how to handle it for me. I know what my risk tolerance was. I'm mid-40s. I'm in a relatively good shape. I eat okay. Not a high-risk category of having major consequences of getting COVID, especially now because COVID is a fancy cold because it's gotten less strong as it's evolved. So that part of the risk was never a part of it. Because in a society as vast and as large as the United States, a one-size approach never works because people have different risk tolerances. If you're older, you're overweight, we know what the risk tolerances are. You shouldn't rely on Fauci to tell you what to do. And this story proves it because he tried to control the information that you got so you could only make a halfway educated decision because that's what the control of information is. And to go back to the classification of 1 billion documents every year, that's what they're doing. They're controlling information. They're controlling the information so you don't see how horrible they are at making decisions. Because I was actually just talking about my friend Travis I went out with last night. And we were talking about, Travis used to be in the Army. He was in the Army for 20 years. And we're talking about the WikiLeaks story. Julian Assange, the journalist that got documents from Chelsea Manning, who at the time was Bradley Manning. And those documents showed a bunch of things the Army did that wasn't so good. Killed innocent people, dropped bombs in wrong places, all these things. Horrible things. But they were classified. And they weren't classified because the techniques or because there was state secrets in it. They were classified because they were horrible. And they would have changed many Americans' view on the war and maybe advocated for some troops to come home. So they didn't want that. So they controlled the information. So the point in all of this is we're being played. If you see, and I used to buy into this stuff too, a CIA story in the New York Times, oh, leak. Those leaks are on purpose. It's propaganda. So my point in all of this, to go back to the language that you see, whether it is the anti-Trump side from Vox, oh my God, Donald Trump, oh my God, or if it's the pro-Trump side saying that the government is evil, the government is bad, understand that there is an element of propaganda in both. Understand that there is a controlled flow of information to try to influence you to be on that side. Using my stoicism, dichotomy of control, only controlling me, I don't want to be controlled by this language. I don't want to be controlled by Anthony Fauci and what's behind the scenes because I'm in control of me. And that's ultimately what matters. So with this Trump story, with this poll of young voters not loving America, not feeling optimistic about America, that lies the opportunity to spread personal responsibility. Mike and I, a while back, had our buddy Slavo on the Brumance podcast. And I'd encourage you to go back and find this. I would just Google it. The Brumance, Slavo, and pull up this podcast because what Slavo talked about, by the way, there are many swear words in it. But our buddy Slavo, he's a chef here in Phoenix, created Slavo salt. It's the best seasoning ever. And yeah, that's a free plug, but I would encourage you to buy it. And if you use the code word brew at slavosalt.com, you're going to save yourself 20%. Trust me, try this Slavo salt. You're going to love it. But Slavo's point was he had troubles with alcohol and he knew he had to change. And he came across Jocko Willinik's book, Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. And he decided to take extreme ownership of his life for his decisions. And something that I did too, because no one made those decisions but me. Maybe I was misguided. Maybe information was kept from me by my government or by someone else. So I didn't make a fully informed decision, but it was my decision. And I take responsibility for that. And I now take my responsibility as an American, as a voter, to have rational conversations because the emotional conversations are not getting us anywhere. Emotional conversations are going to lead to emotional decisions. And I don't know about you guys. I don't know about you, Greg. Appreciate you, Nancy, Rhonda, Lynn, Truman. When you make emotional decisions, you usually regret it. Countries do this too. We're making emotional decisions. And emotional decisions lead to bigger problems down the lines you got to fix. So that's what I'm advocating today. I'm advocating that we take personal responsibility for the country as it is, because we did play a role in it. We can blame the politicians all we want, but who sent them there? Collectively, we did. I read Peggy Noonan, Wall Street Journal. Peggy Noonan's my favorite columnist because she's rational and optimistic. Her point yesterday in her column after the Trump verdict, 34 counts, felony, Trump is a felon. Her point was, Peggy Noonan, we're enjoying the hate. Again, that's emotion. We're enjoying hating each other. I don't like that. I ain't got time to be angry. I ain't got time to hate people. Life's too short. So what I want is results. And what we're not getting is results. And these young people in America are seeing it. And they understand stories like this, that they were lied to during the pandemic. And you have to think about an 18-year-old right now. They're going through the pandemic at those formative years, 14, 15, 16 years old. I have a friend from high school who is an educator now. So I'm going to have him on my solo project. Mike's got his Go Show. Check it out every day at 11, Monday through Friday. I've got Equal Matters, my podcast. I'm going to be expanding that as well. I'm going to have my friend Brian on to talk about what he teaches high school. So what are these current kids, what do they think about the world? Because it's much different. And I think about myself. If I was 14 years old, where I was at emotionally, and they shut down my school, and they didn't let me graduate high school, I was a bit different back then. I was much more emotional. I don't know how I would have handled all of that. Probably not well, because I was already depressed. So that's what we've done to kids, because people like Fauci hid information that kids were not at risk. Kids could have gone to school, but it's politics, man. The teachers' unions knew that their teachers, some of them were scared, so they forced the shutdown of schools. But it wasn't just the shutdown of schools. It's the shutdown of learning. It's the shutdown of advancing people. So we live in a different world because of all of that, but therein lies the opportunity, especially when you see things like this. Again, language matters. But this is ridiculous. Maybe you heard this. Over in Illinois, they passed a bill that will, on legal documents, say that criminals are now justice impacted individuals. Talking about emotions. If the word offender, criminal is offensive, who's it offensive to? Who's making these decisions? Who's trying to get this to be the thing? Because that, to me, proves how great America is, that we're debating words. Homelessness is now unhoused. Fine. It still means the same thing. So we're upset about the synonym, but not the other synonym. It's stupid. And most people understand this. Young people understand this. So all of this stuff is there. But there's enough of the yelling approach. To go back to Peggy Noonan, enjoying hating the other side. What good does that do? It's emotional energy for you. It is something you got to work through. It's a lot of effort. Sorry, I'm just looking across the street. There is a crane over there. Must be replacing the air conditioner. Things you see in the desert when it's hot out. A crane replacing an air conditioner. So, what do we do? What do we do? Practice our stoicism. We talk to people. Remain optimistic. And take ownership of where this country's at and our role in it. Because I'm not really looking at 2024 right now, because it's either going to be Biden or Trump, unless something crazy happens, and that may happen because Biden is desperate, as we showed you earlier, desperately trying to raise money to keep up with Trump's $35 million raised after the guilty verdict, desperate with black voters. So Biden is going out and really being incredibly disparaging to black voters, just like New York's Governor Kathy Hochul was when said, yeah, many people are just don't even know what a laptop is. What? Meaning black people. All of the reality is there. But the yelling and the screaming and the outrage is not going to work for everybody to get them on our side, the side of freedom, the side of America. There are going to have to be rational conversations like we're having now. So I'd encourage you to share it. I know I ask you that all the time, and Mike asks you that all the time, but you guys are with us, and we love that you're with us. It is absolutely amazing to be able to walk away from a big-time radio station and attempt to do this on our own, and to have Larry show up, and Grizz, and Lynn, and Rhonda, and Greg, and all you guys, Colin, as I scroll through the comments here. We can build something. because that's what it's going to take. That's that responsibility. The responsibility is on building. So I'm starting my own business. I've been starting my own business. I work with a couple other businesses, my wife's. I work with a company called Earn It All, fitness and nutrition programming. Oh, it's so amazing. This stuff that we do is killer. But in building my own communication business and coaching, I got to build it brick by brick, day by day. I got to do the work. America is the same way. We all have a part in it because if you're here, you love this country just like I do because it has provided us with opportunities. Rhonda, thank you. Appreciate you hanging out. Lynn, you too. And I'm going to wrap this up here in a minute. But I encourage you to accept that responsibility as an American and honor those that have sacrificed for us, those that paid with their lives so that we could live free. This is going to require work. That freedom isn't going to be solved by Trump. It's going to take longer than that. It's going to take efforts on our part to find new candidates to get them to run for Congress, in the Senate, in our state legislative bodies. People that have character, people that aren't looking to be viral or famous, people that are logical, don't let their emotions make decisions for them, and actually try to put policies in place to foster prosperity. More prosperity, higher standard of living across the board. So today, we understand that maybe America's changed, but maybe that's our call to shape it the way that we want, to create the opportunities that we want, to create the country that we want, because it is in our power if we do it collectively, if we do it rationally, and understand, yeah, we're going to get emotional about some things, but let's handle those emotions. Let's get back to building day by day the country that we want. On that note, thank you very much. Get this. Mike and I, starting next week, you're going to see more of us. Monday we'll be on. Tuesday we'll be on. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, noon. Now, I'm not sure Monday. Mike and I did not talk about this. We may do 4 o'clock on Monday as we've been traditionally, but we're going to do noon the rest of the week. So pop on, say hi. Let's have these conversations. In the meantime, it is the weekend. Enjoy it. Maybe have a cocktail. Maybe sit out on the back patio if it's not too hot. Go do something. Do something for you. My name is Rob Hunter. For Mike Russell, we are the Brewmans. Cheers.